on in Alberta. Danielle Smith, I knew her from the university. We were actually, at the same time she was the leader of the Young Progressive Conservatives, I was the president of the Campus Reform Party. It was very funny. I mean, I've known her for 30 years. And I sort of fell out of touch with her when she defected to the Conservatives, and it was like 8 or 9 years ago. But I've had a reconnection with her. I've interviewed her a couple of times. I like generally the direction she's in, and I judge her a lot by her enemies. Yeah. I judge her by who's squawking about her. I judge her by what the Globe and Mail and Maclean says against her. The more they hate her, the more I say, okay, she's doing well.
Yeah, and she's learning, I think, from Pierre Poilievre and how she handles the media. I don't know if you saw it. She did exactly what Pierre Poilievre did when he did the Apple eating thing. A journalist asked her, you know, we've seen emissions go up in Alberta. And she said, tell me your numbers. Where'd you get your numbers? The journalist was caught completely flat-footed. It is so refreshing to see politicians now, particularly conservative ones, be emboldened enough to push back against the media, to treat the enemy or to treat the media like the enemy that they are. It's good to finally see them recognize
You're so right. And in Alberta in particular, the CBC, in an unethical manner, really campaigned against her in the last election. They knew their mission was to kill her, and they didn't succeed. You know, it's funny because I was not at the Apple Orchard moment, which was just classic, but I was at an event with Pierre Poilievre when that CP reporter sort of said, oh, you made a false announcement about a purported terror attack at the Rainbow Bridge. And he said, no, I'm referenced to media report. They went back and forth, and I was there. I hadn't been to a press conference like that in a while.
Yep.
And what was interesting to me, Sheila, is I think there were 5 or 6 reporters there. I got the first question, and I asked about Hamas on the streets, which was the theme of the press conference. Here's what I saw about the rest of the questions. There was one Jewish reporter there for a Jewish newspaper who asked a Jewish question, but put that aside. The rest of the reporters, CBC, CTV, Global, etc., none of them asked about what Pierre Poilievre said.
Right.
All of them asked about really obscure hobby horse vendetta issues. And what's interesting is almost all of them just read verbatim from their phone. Now, I'm not criticizing. Sometimes I write my questions out if I want it to be just perfect. But what I sensed there is they were reading questions sent to them by Central Command from the CBC. And so when Pierre Poilievre pushed back, in this case on the Canadian, they had no idea, because they were just saying, oh, the big boss at the CBC headquarters wrote this perfectly worded attack on Poilievre. I'm going to read it. Okay, but what happens if you're asked to back it up? So it was amazing to watch the back and forth. This Canadian press reporter had no idea. She had never been on the back foot before. She had never debated before. She had never been on the defensive before. She didn't know how to handle it. And predictably, all the other oh, you're a bully. Like you see the CBC ad issue panels. Oh, this is unbecoming of a leader. Really, you didn't say that when you and I and Rebel News was banned from it. I never had that solidarity from other media when we were literally banned, or I hate to say it, when our people were physically assaulted. Never that solidarity. But Pierre Poilievre asked a question, and the entire media party takes it as a moral affront. It's a pleasure to see.
We can't even go to a Liberal press conference. We can't even find out where they are.
Right.
And these people are complaining that being told to back up their contentions to politicians, that's offensive to them. Really, you must see Danielle Smith push back on that person, because he said, you know, emissions are going up in Alberta. So, you know, you're headed off to Dubai and you're going to go there and sell Alberta oil and gas as a clean alternative. She just stopped.
Is there a video clip of it?
There's a video clip.
Let's take a look.
As the owner of this resource, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're taking care of emissions. That's why we set our target in the first place. What we don't accept is the federal government thinking they can do it better than us when they can't. And that's why we're going to be asserting our constitutional right to be able to manage this resource.
Emissions have gone up radically in Alberta. But follow-up question. We had a couple of polls earlier this fall that suggest as many as 2/3 of Albertans actually support an emissions cap on oil and gas. How confident are you that Albertans back you on this?
What are your numbers?
I think it was 62% in one poll and 57% in the other.
No, what are your numbers that you're talking about emissions going up? I just need to know what your baseline is.
It was from the Canadian Energy Regulator, Premier. I mean, I can send them to Sam if you like, but
Well, I gave you
Albertans'
the,
emissions are going up. I don't really want to argue about that. I'd like an answer to my second question, please.
well, you did assert. That's why I'm curious what your numbers are, because I gave you the two examples of how our emissions have gone down. That's why I need to know why you say that they've gone up.
Carbon dioxide emissions have gone up. You're forcing me to guess here, but I think it was something like 256 megatons. I don't have the number offhand. I can find it from the Canadian Energy Regulator and send it along to Sam. Too sweet. But I would like an answer to my second question, please.
Okay, well, I think emissions are going down. This is why we're probably not going to get an answer to this, because yes, emissions have gone down 53% in electricity. They've also gone down 45% on methane. And we're continuing to see that the Pathways Group, Dow Chemical, Air Products, and others have made emissions reduction targets of net zero by 2050. So there is a whole of industry approach to getting emissions down to net neutrality by 2050. It's a matter of rolling out the technology to make sure that we have the means to do it with a technology approach as opposed to with a shut-in approach. So if you asked Albertans, do you want your production shut in so that you lose 1.2 million barrels a day of production and you reduce revenues by 6.5 billion a year and you're cutting a third out of our health budget, I suspect you'd probably get a very different answer, because that is what the implications of a production cut of this magnitude would be. And that is not something that Albertans support, and it's certainly not something that the federal government should support either. When this industry gave $9 billion worth of corporate income tax to them last year, that is the consequences of what would happen if we ended up with a production cut, which we won't allow to happen.
You're right. She is picking up a little bit of the app. I think Pierre Poilievre should. I mean, you don't want to walk around with an apple in your pocket because that's going to be a big bulge. But if you have an apple holder, like Pierre Poilievre always travels with an assistant, I think that assistant should have a little apple in like a suitcase or a purse or whatever. And if there's an apple, I think they should rush and hand the apple to the boss. And then I think the boss should take it. This is just my theory, because I think it would be such a winning move. Let's get back to Danielle Smith for a second. There was a moment there when on the provincial scene, it looked pretty bleak. And I think Doug Ford is actually a Liberal. I think he's a disgrace. But Scott Moe, Danielle Smith, I see this Blaine Higgs. He was terrible during the lockdowns, but boy, he's standing up for things in terms of parental consent, or at least informing parents about their kids changing genders. I see a national revolt against carbon taxes. I see now the head of the Northwest Territories is saying, we can't have a carbon tax. Everything we do is based on diesel. Everything has to be shipped in or flown in. I sense that Danielle Smith is not alone, and there's this new coalition of premiers who are in their calm manner. They're not bomb throwers, they're just in a calm manner saying, you know what, we're sort of not going to go along with Trudeau anymore. He is unpopular, his ideas are unpopular, he's still pretending it's 2015, and carbon tax is the thing people want to care about instead of cost of living and housing. I like the way things are going in the provincial scene.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a little bit of the DeSantis effect with Danielle Smith, and I say DeSantis as the governor and not the candidate for the president of the United States, in that she'll go out on these tough issues first, quite frequently, or at least the loudest. Sometimes Saskatchewan is leading on these issues. They had their Sovereignty Act before we ever did in Alberta, but they just quietly did it. We're a little bit more bombastic in Alberta. She'll go out loud, she'll put the feds on warning, and wouldn't you know it, all the other premiers sidle up behind her and say, you know what, us too. And we saw Ron DeSantis do that when he said, I'm not going to do lockdowns anymore. Then all of a sudden, Kristi Noem in the Dakotas said same thing. So I think she's doing a little bit of that. And you'd be surprised who's joining her on these issues. For example, in Manitoba, Wab Kinew. He's saying, you know what, we need a carbon tax break here too. He's breaking with his own party and being more of one of those prairie pragmatist NDPers that we saw so many years ago.